Blessings, dear heart, and thank you so much for being here today on this very special global broadcasting with a dear soul and a dear friend, Paul Luftenegger. Paul, I am so delighted that you're here with us, celebrating how to be kind to our minds, how to be kind to your mind, how to be kind to each other, how to be kind to Mother Earth. This is all part of our celebration and our third global broadcasting presented by Rainbow Letters to Mother Earth project. And it's an amazing, amazing opportunity for all of us to come together, united, and explore, understand more, inspire one another, how we can be friends with our thoughts, how we can help one another to go through this kind of anxious and fearful period of our lifetime, and how we can help our children and the young generation. What can we do? So here we are, we're going to be having a wonderful exchange of soulful musings and deep reflections with Paul and myself, ChriSOULa Sirigou. Paul, thank you so much. A warm welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, and I love what you're doing. I think mental health is so important, especially in 2020 with everything going on. So I really, I'm really grateful to set the intention to really come together in healing from the space of mental health, because we're all going through such huge shifts around the world that we have to have a really, I think, clear understanding of mental health. So I'm all for this.
Yes, and it makes it more real to you when you know you've got someone in your close family or friends that have been affected by mental health, by mental illness, and irrespective of what the issue may be, but it brings home to you basically that, what can I do? How can I be of service? How can I bring more awareness out there and help people and help parents, help teachers, help anyone, and elderly as well, because we're all, mental health for me is across generations, is not an issue that affects only the elderly because they may have issues with dementia, or is not something that it may be only with teenagers. It could be anyone can be affected. So I know through your work, Paul, that you are an international award-winning songwriter and singer, and through your music, through your angelic voice, and I am not exaggerating when I say that, you are connected with all of us, and you are bringing your energy and your kindness and your love. And we're talking about rainbow love as well. Yes, a bit of rainbow, colorful love through your work. So you're here sharing your experience and your story as well, and why you believe in mental health. And actually, let's talk about mental health prevention. And in your case, it was more to do with suicide prevention. And you may have heard other people going through this. You may have had someone very close to you. I've got somebody very close to me that suffers from depression, my mom. And she's been having issues with depression for a number of years now. And I know, Paul, that you have got your own story to share. And that was your inspiration to carry on, inspire others to connect with our hearts and connect with, listen with our hearts. I think that's what I would love to start off the conversation with you. How can we listen more with our hearts?
Well, I think, the most important thing that you've said, in my opinion, is actually bringing in focus on listening. And I think I remember speaking to an audiologist a long time ago now, and she was explaining to me about when you give the gift of a hearing aid to someone that has never heard before, there's hearing, but then there's listening, and they're not the same thing. So I think that oftentimes we hear things, You know, we go about our life, we hear this, we hear that, but then there's actually listening. And listening requires your heart, it requires your soul, and it requires your intention to actually care. And I think this is the big thing about listening that's very different than hearing. So when my father, you know, from suicide, it was in 2011 that my father took his own life, and it was March the 6th of 2011. And the thing that I just want to say to suicide in particular is that you never sort of see it coming, but you have, what I know now is you understand it backwards. And, you know, all the signs and symptoms were there for my father. I just didn't really understand what those were. So I think educating yourself on what those signs look like, what they present like, is the first thing that I always like to bring into focus, because, you know, suicide does not discriminate. And you know, I really didn't understand that my father would do this. I didn't understand that at the time. So, you know, the signs are depression, and the signs are also, you know, making everything great and fun. And my dad was really great at that because that's how he survived his depression. He was a beautiful soul, really childish in his nature, and he was really positive for the most part in his life. So he challenged himself by being positive. And I will say the thing that I wish I did more is I wish I listened to him more with my heart and my soul. And I think also accept him for who he was. I was someone that was always trying to help him be better than he was. And that really isn't always the best approach to people that are depressed, because sometimes that's not the remedy that they need. So I recognize that now. I didn't know that then. And I don't have shame about that either, because we do the best we can. And we understand life backwards. We live it forward, but we understand it backwards. So what's really interesting in suicide prevention in particular is that most people that are in suicide prevention are people that have survived a suicide. And that's the thing that's really interesting, is it used to be led by more physicians, but actually today it's led more by people that have survived a suicide. And that's sort of an interesting kind of thing that I didn't know existed. So if you dig in, I think, first of all, just having a conversation about mental health is really important, and giving people permission to share how they're feeling, how life is treating them, and to listen with an open heart and a non-judgment.
Which is not an easy thing to do.
No.
Because sometimes what we tend to do, we want to rescue them, right? We want, as you said, we want to offer solutions. We want to make things better for them. But I guess what they really need at this point in time is somebody just to accept where they are and accept it without trying to do anything, just listen with compassion. And as you said, we all try to do our best. But if we know how to read the signs and respond in a way that we can be there for them and we are available to listen, then I guess that could be a good space, a good place to start.
Absolutely. The thing that I remember reading very soon after my dad died, a very beautiful statement, and it was that to listen is to love. And I live by that as best I can. And, you know, none of us are perfect. I sometimes catch myself where I'm not listening. And the thing that reminds me to listen is just, you know, to kind of go inside my heart when someone's speaking, and to make sure that we have a two-way dialogue. Sometimes people don't know how to do that. And I think it's important to sort of exercise and, you know, become better at that two-way sort of conversation. So, yeah.
Yes. It's easy just to jump onto something else. Sometimes, you know, I say, well, excuse me, I was just talking about something, you know, you just interrupted me. And to have that confidence to say that to somebody, it's not an easy thing to do either, you know, but it's just actually to accept that you are worth the time and you're worth the attention to share, and allow that space for somebody to be patient with you, to allow you to articulate, to express how you feel, or to express your voice, to express your opinion. Sometimes we feel as if, oh, I'm going to take space now. Oh, is it okay for me to take space now? And and the whole thing also starts with feel that you matter. I think that's another area that you're very passionate about, that, you know, we do matter.
Absolutely. That's the most, I think, the thing in my own healing, you know, I didn't really know that I needed to heal anything per se when my father, you know, before he died. But then what was really interesting through that particular space and time, I recognized that I had a lot of healing to do. And it was many things before my father's suicide that I needed to heal. So I did what I would call as a life review on
Mm-hmm.
myself from the moment I had, you know, my conception ultimately with my womb in my mother's, my, you know, when I was created is sort of where I went back to. And I went through my life and
Mm.
all the things that I had sort of, you know, perhaps been good at, and some of the things that I wasn't so great at. And I recognized in my review of my life, in that particular time, that the biggest thing was self-worth. And it's very interesting because when you dig into the science behind a lot of this, the first 7 years of your life are very important. The space in that particular time is sort of what forms the way that you process information, how you respond to stimuli. And what's very interesting is that when you go back to that space, there are things there that I think are there for a reason to help you now.
Mm.
So in my life review, I was shown very clearly, and you know, I'm very spiritual, so I'm always with God, source, you know, the beloved, I call God. And I went to God because this is really where that space is holy for me. And that's the space that you keep holy inside of yourself. And I went with God through my life. And the thing that I noticed is that I wasn't so great at self-worth after the age of 7. And the world started coming in and scaring me.
Mm.
And before the age of 7, I was very loved and nurtured from my granny, from the people that cared for me. And you're free when you're a child, you know, you let your needs be known when you're a child. That's just the beauty of a child. And that's there to remind us, I believe, as we become more of the parent to ourself in our adult life. And I recognized that, you know, over time in my life, I became scared of, I think ultimately, you know, valuing my worth.
Mhm.
And, you know, that comes from being gay. That comes from, you know, a series of, you know, being bullied in certain ways when I was a child. And I had a great childhood, but I had things in it that weren't so great. And the thing that I recognized is that I needed to work on my self-worth. And because we are here, we are worthy. And worth begins with that particular moment. And I think really ultimately what happens in life is we don't focus in on our self-worth and our self-love, I think, optimally. And I know that my father and the suicide that I went through with my father, I wouldn't have been able to heal if I didn't start with self-worth.
Mm.
So once I sort of had that sort of figured out, I then started to sort of almost expand my heart, in a totally different way that I didn't anticipate. And I started listening to my inner voice very, very specifically. And I made a promise to my heart that I would follow my heart.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because when you follow your heart, it's kind of like a North Star for your soul, and it will guide you nowhere that you are not meant to be. I have been, you know, I've been in the most beautiful places since that promise to myself in 2011. And it's really interesting looking at it now, almost 10 years later, because I've had experiences that have nourished me. And I think that's what happens when you follow your heart. You become nourished by life. And it's really cool because it kind of heals the wounds of your past. So
Yes.
that's sort of how I feel that, you know, we can optimally be healthy in our minds is by following our heart. And that statement that, you know, from the head to the heart is the longest journey you'll ever take. And I know it seems so ridiculous that it's only from here to here, but it's very true, and I know it.
Yes, it is honestly, it is a journey.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of persistence and patience, because not everything falls into the right place straight away after you read a book or you do a course or you write a song or you meet somebody you love, or, you know, things are always coming into your way to make you feel more connected to your essence and more connected to your truth and to the bigger picture. You know, why are you here? And as you said, Paul, you're here, I'm here, we are here because we chose to be here. We chose to be here and now on planet Earth. It is a choice, and you made that choice. So let's make the best out of it, shall we? Let's
Yeah.
make the best out of it, because it's such a beautiful place to be. And I know there are challenges. I do appreciate that, and I don't like only to just to sugarcoat anything, or to say, oh, things are go with the flow. And yes, all of these are lovely statements and lovely expressions. But there are always, jumps, and there are always, summits we need to go up, and once we say go up and then persevere and go forward, but with this kind of determination that there's always beauty in this life, and
Yeah.
is worth living for. And yes, and learning how to appreciate our thoughts and how our thoughts have an impact on the way we feel and our emotions, and connect with our emotions. And of course, you may have heard of emotional intelligence or emotional coherence or heart coherence. And Bruce Cryer is another amazing friend of ours that he will also be part of the summit, of the Big Kind to Your Mind summit. And this is part of us understanding our journey more. And kindness is a great asset, a great seed that we can cultivate in our lives, and cultivate with each other's relationship as well. But if we don't start from within, yes, you can be kind to somebody else, but if you're not kind to yourself, how can you express that holistically? Because we are mind, body, heart, and spirit. Yeah, so we really need to understand how our thoughts have an impact on our hearts, and our hearts can have an impact on our thoughts. So it's all part and parcel of that. We cannot just put it in one compartment, say, going to look after my thoughts today, and tomorrow I'm going to look after my emotions, and another day I'm going to look after my body. It's just not like that, is it? So we really need to think that everything is interconnected. And you as a unit as well, as a spirit in a body, you are connected with the wider environment, with nature, with Mother Earth, with the cosmos, and anything that goes with it. I'm talking cosmos, I'm talking about not only the planets the wonderful planets, but also, the celestial beings and the angels, the archangels. For me, I connect with dragon energy as well. And so open up to yourself to believe that there's so much magic in the world. And there's so much beauty to experience, and we can only do that experiencing love for one another. But it starts, as you said, Paul, with self-love. It starts with self-love, and all the thoughts that are going through your mind, it's about becoming more conscious. And it is a journey. I get it. We are not always engaged with the way we think. But once we start, pressing a bit of pause, oh, what did I say about myself just now? Did I say I'm not worthy? Did I say I'm not good enough? Did I say, oh, you stupid thing, why did you do that? Be mindful of the language we use, be mindful of the way we express anything about ourselves. It is an education. We started off with that, didn't we? How we can educate ourselves, and as adults, we are the role models. And that's also, I'm coming back to you, Paul, because you being the role model, and then through your music and through your work, you actually, you give another, you uplift us. And it is such a gift to do that. But also you've got that connection with music, which is something, it's very special. Would you like to say something more about that, about your work?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to just touch on, and this is really important, I wanted to sort of go back to what you were just saying, because this is really important. And I think people don't really understand how important this is. So one of the things that I notice now really clearly, and the first thing that I feel intuitively I meant to say here, the easiest thing to sort of focus in on is that words have power. And one day we'll be able to measure how much power each word has.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand that words have power. And the reason why they have power is because we have power.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand from within us is a power that is greater than any one thing. And when you use words, that power goes out in a frequency or a vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And that power is very real. That starts with your thought. That starts with what you choose to say. And it all sort of just happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to become very conscious of the words you use. And the thing that I feel intuitively to say here is that a lot of times people, I hear it all the time, you know, that makes me sick. Or like, you know, those are things that I don't ever say to myself. I won't do it actually. And when I hear it from someone else, it really stops me in my tracks and makes me realize how I don't do that ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that we start understanding the language that we use to speak to ourselves first, and the outer world is very much a representation of what we create. And we have to begin with understanding that we're creators. And this is very, very important because we create the experiences that we're going to have by the words we use from the thoughts we have. And that languaging is really important. So when I was going through, you know, the time of writing music when I first started, I knew that I wanted to put out the words that were only good, that were only loving, that were only kind. And I think this is very interesting 10 years later because I've had 7 albums of conscious words that are all written from the first person so that the listener feels like these words are theirs. So this is the part that's very interesting. What's interesting about it is that vibration goes out, but then what's really cool is in the audience that I've had as a community around my work, like you and many people around the world, is they've come into my life and we have this shared understanding of words and thoughts having power. And we created an experience together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here with you today because of those words that I chose to use. I wouldn't know you otherwise. And this proves that we have power from our thoughts and our vibrations. And I think we need to start thinking like this from an energetic perspective in order for this new world that we're living in to bloom more love. So this is a very beautiful thing about music that I love because it's interesting, you know, even a book, you know, I remember I used to always think that books were silly, which is so stupid in my mind. I don't even know where that came from. But after my father died, I needed books so much. So I became this, like almost like this walking, I couldn't read enough books. And I would go to bookstores and spend full days there and read books and books and books and books and books on, I think, just wellness. And I recognized that there was a whole world I didn't know anything about. And this is where mental health comes in, I think, is that we have to realize that there's this thing inside of us that is an intelligence waiting to be nurtured with love. And when we nurture ourselves with self-love, I've met the most incredible, beautiful people that are changing this world. And I call us light workers, and we're all around the world. And we're really understanding that that's what's happening as we awaken this beautiful heart and soul and spirit inside of us that is all really, quite frankly, coming together again. And I think it's really an exciting time to be alive on Earth because we're starting to see the results of what we've worked at doing, which is healing ultimately ourselves from, you know, some discord in the past and forgiving it. And it all begins with thought, how you speak to yourself and how you, and Louise Hay Louise Hay, if you know anything about this, is the master of this. And she was an incredible being. My song, My Heart, was used for her 90th birthday, which I find incredible when I think about it all these years later. And what's so cool about it is that she used to have bad thoughts sometimes, and she would have a go-to, and she would always think of yellow roses whenever she thought of a bad thought. And it's just having something positive ready for that bad thought that might come, and just shifting the way you think about yourself. Yeah. So I think this is such an important discussion, especially during COVID. especially during this, this world pandemic. We need some tools to handle a lot of things that are going on in our new world. And I'm excited that we have the ability to do this. You're in the UK, I'm in Canada, and we take this time to really make sure that we nurture each other. And that's really what this is about. So I really want to honor you for this too, because it's a big thing to hold this space open for people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear heart. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Yes, learning to nourish our soul through books, through music. For me, particularly through this COVID pandemic, it was connection with nature, and I've always loved nature. Don't get me wrong. I was always conscious of nature. I'm always conscious of colors and birds singing. But one thing that brings me back to what is real and what is important, it's back to the present moment.
Yeah.
Because when we are allowing a thought to take over, whatever the thought is, just press, just try to cut it, with something, as you said, yellow roses, or just look outside. Yes, it's raining where I am now. Be grateful for the rain. Be grateful for the green grass. Be grateful for the beautiful trees I'm looking. Just turn your attention to something positive, dear hearts. Please do. It's not as hard as we may think it is. It's a habit. I know that we are becoming more governed by negative thoughts. However, we can be allowing to be experiencing positive thoughts and be kind to ourselves. And when you're kind to yourself, then you can be kind to other people. You can be a kinder parent. You can be a kinder teacher, whatever work you may do. So there's so many tools out there, Paul. So thank you for everything that you bring into this world.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I wanted, just touching on nature, and
sure.
The reality is the one thing I do want to talk about, because I think grief is really something that I don't think people really understand what grief is until they get there. And I think it's really important that we're prepared when we go through grief to have an understanding of, I think, the embodiment of grief. Grief, first of all, there's really, there's birth and there's death, and both are very important parts of life. And they're very similar, actually, because a rebirth happens from death. But with grief in particular, the thing that I think it's important to just sort of expand on with nature, because if anyone's suffering, and this is the thing, I remember suffering. When my dad died, I suffered a lot. And this is the truth. I mean, I speak openly about this. I recognize that I was suffering, and grief is a great suffering. And we as human beings, I think, have to witness a great suffering from what's going on in the planet. And this is not sugarcoating anything. We have all suffered, and we all have crosses to bear, like Jesus carried his cross to literally die on. And we have these huge missions that are massive. And I know that there's suffering that we have to feel, and it's really brutal. And I think a lot of us are really sensitive. I'm a very sensitive person. I recognize this as a gift now. I used to feel a bit of shame about being sensitive. So when you switch that around, it's very cool what can come of it. And going back to nature, in my grief and in my suffering, the one thing where I found heaven, always within my heart and in nature. Human beings are messy at times. So I remember the one thing that I used to do every single day without fail is I would go to the park and walk for 2 hours. And I used to actually go on my own sometimes and with my husband, but I would always hug trees. And I just needed to be stabilized by nature. And it was the one thing that I didn't care what people thought of me for the first time in my life, because I was about survival. I needed to survive my suffering. And I remember going to trees, and I felt this energy start to sort of shift in me when we would commune with the nature. And I did that for, I was in suffering, really, if I look at it, for a good couple of years. And nature was the only thing that healed me. There was nothing else that could heal me. And watching the seasons change reminded me that nature still goes on, even in our suffering. And its constant cycle reminds us to get back into the rhythm of our life.
Yeah.
And this is really important if you're suffering with any mental health issue, because I think nature is the reminder that we are nature, and that we have a flow and a cycle. And we start to get into a rhythm with our, our thoughts, with our hearts, with our, I think, the river of our life. And I would even say this: I used to be someone that used to really paddle, going up a river. I would paddle so hard to just go. And when my dad died, I just took my water, my paddle out of the water, and just let really, quite frankly, my soul take me where it needed to go. And I stopped fighting life.
Yeah.
And this is where I think we're all starting to understand more about how to let life flow instead of really, not being in the flow of it. And I think we're in a time, in 2020 where, even with COVID, I mean, it brings up I remember the beginning of this in March. It was scary. It was really, really scary. We didn't know what we were dealing with.
It still is.
It is still scary. I will say, I think that we have an understanding of it though, and we've shifted an incredible amount in our fear of what it is. And, all these months later, I think we know what to do to take precautions and to control our environments, as best we can. And at the same time, still live, because it's challenged us in a way where we've had to find a new way to live. But human beings are really resilient, and, we're nature. And many people don't realize this medically even, but, viruses actually are how we've evolved. And, then it starts making you have the question of what is life? And life is so much more beyond just this moment, and it's eternal. So I think it's brought in some focus on, I think, the soul and, connecting with people. It's very interesting now, because I think when we take the time to connect with people, it seems so much more pure, maybe is a good word, and it matters. And, I've been really busy in different ways than I've never been busy, as I'm sure you have. And what's kind of cool in it is that I feel that this is the space where we're really, I think, starting to understand the connection that we can have when we focus in. So I just think it's really, it's a big time on the earth, and
it is.
All of these things are coming together to show us the way.
Yes, it is. It is. It's all part of changing,
Yeah.
adapting, and evolving. That's
Yes.
that's what it is. Part of our evolution. And there's some things need to go, and some new things need to come in, and that's part of what's happening. It has been happening for millennia. So it's time to just allow more time to connect with yourself, connect with nature, connect with one another, and be kind to yourself, be kind to your mind, be kind to each other, and be kind to Mother Earth as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul, for these wonderful soulful musings between us. Yeah. Thank you for your music. Thank you for your work and who you are. I'm honored to have this conversation here with you, and thank you all for being part of our Be Kind to Your Mind Summit, and our mission and vision of Rainbow Letters to Mother Earth. And lots of love from me, ChriSOULa, and lots of love from...
Lots of love from me to everyone as well. Thank you so much.